Hey everybody, I'm Brian Fitzy. Welcome to another episode of Building Blocks. Today I'm going to do something that I actually was asked to produce as far as a lesson goes, and that is something that is a pretty basic thing that you should know how to do, especially if you're a guitarist, changing strings on the guitar. So I've got my one of my absolute favorite workhorse guitars here. This is a Vester Stratocaster that I've modified pretty heavily. I think it's a 1990. It might be an 89. I've got locking tuners on this, which not all guitars are going to have. Actually, most guitars stock, you're probably not going to have locking tuners. But fundamentally, this is going to still be the same. So I've got my existing strings on it. I'm going to take them off. What we're going to do is just loosen them all. You never want to just take your snips and cut these strings off while they're under tension. That's not going to be good. I like to change my strings realistically like every 30 hours. Every 30 hours of playing. That should be specified. If you're playing in conditions where the strings are going to get beat up a lot more readily, you're going to need to change them even more often. For example, I've done several tours in Mexico, and going throughout Mexico, especially in the summer months, I'm sweating so much on stage that my guitar is getting completely drenched, and the strings are just full of, sweat, and they just get grimy really fast. And they'd actually rust out overnight, which is just crazy that you would run into a problem like that. So what you're going to do after you get all your strings loosened is you're going to use a pair of snips, and you're just going to cut the strings. I like to cut them kind of close to the end of the neck. So I'm just going to cut these all off here. Best advice if you've had your guitar set up, especially, which you should have it done, or set it up yourself. That is an entirely separate lesson here, but stick with the same gauge or relatively close to the same gauge. If you're using a mixed set, try to stick with whatever string you were using for each, whatever gauge you were using for each string. Try to stay as close as possible to that. I'm going to be putting on a set of Diodarios here. These are the ELX 110s, and I really like the sound of them. I love the tone on them, and I really like how they last, and they feel great and they sound great on specifically on my Strats. So all my single coil guitars, I'm usually running 10s. Sometimes you're going to get a string that's going to bind up a little bit. It might take a little bit of work to get it out. If you're changing strings on a Fender or Fender style guitar, you're going to have the strings actually get fed through the back. Let's get it in focus here. So the strings are actually going to feed through here. If you're playing like a Gibson, Epiphone, any guitar that's got the bridge sitting up here, you're going to feed them through the back of the bridge. If you have a absolutely wild guitar that doesn't even have a headstock, that's going to be a whole separate thing. And I'm not even going to get into locking nuts or any of that. That's just a lot more stuff. This is going to be as straightforward as possible, so this is one of my more straightforward guitars. And it's also my favorite gigging guitar. Now, when it comes to actually removing the strings when you're dealing with locking tuners, you have to use a screwdriver to loosen the tuning machines on the top. That will break the hold. The way these work is, instead of having to feed the strings through and have a bit more slack, you can actually just kind of pull them, not just basically hand tight, and then these machines, these tuning machines, will actually bind on and bite and grab a lot more easily than when you're just relying on essentially friction to hold the strings in place. So I really love these. This was one of the first modifications I did to this instrument, and then I did the pickups after that. Swapped out the stock passive single coils. When you get done and put in actives, which requires changing a battery in the guitar, which is not something I'm exactly always excited about, but I do love the tone, and there's no single coil pickup hum or any of that. If you've never done this when you are changing your strings, it's really nice to make things easier on yourself and not ultimately end up stepping on broken strings. Just wind them up real tight like this. Make your life a little easier on the backside. I'm going to grab up the ball ends here, and I'm just going to twine them in as well. So, strings that I'm going with are going to be the exact same gauge. I've been really happy with these strings for a long time. Really nice thing here is when you pull these strings out of the package, you're actually going to see different colors on the ball ends here. And there is a chart that will tell you what string corresponds with what color. So that'll make your life way easier. Normally this would be an opportunity for me to wipe down the guitar. It's pretty much clean. I'm honestly going to probably have to change the strings in another couple of days anyway, because I'm going to be performing outside, which is something I haven't done in a long time. Not much, at least, with everything that's happening. So I'm going to start here with my very, very lowest string, my low E string. This is going to be the brass for Diodarios. So just loosen it up, get it out of, they're wound up the exact same way that the strings were that I got done with. Just makes things easier for the packaging. And on a Strat, you're going to feed it from the back. So they're going to go in through the holes that are down here. So I'm going to feed this string in. Bring it up through. You want to make sure that if it's being fed through the back, that you've got it all the way up through the hole and that it's not snagging on anything. If you're feeding it through the bridge on a Gibson style or a Gretsch style guitar, you want to make sure that, again, it's not binding up anywhere. Make sure the ball is tight in there, flush in there. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to feed it through your tuning machine. And I like to usually try to orient the machine so I can just feed straight on through. That's the exact way to do this. With locking tuners like I have, I'm literally just going to feed it through and I'm going to have it taut. Just as, you know, if I hold the end of it up top, a little tough with the webcam. If I hold it up top just enough that I can get a little bit of super low tone out of it. Okay? That's where I'm going to want. And then I'll start tightening the tuner, and that will lock onto the string. If I'm going to be stringing up tuners that do not have locking tuners, I like to be 4, 5, or even 6 inches off of the neck, about like that. Less so with the lower strings, more so with the higher strings, because you're going to be able to get more winds around the machine. But let's say 4 inches, and I'll kink the string up at the top in the direction that the machine is going to turn. That way I've got a little bit of an anchor point. And then I want to hold my finger down here while I tighten it up. You can have different tools to do the tightening, make things faster. This is a string winder. I use them maybe 50% of the time. It's not really that big of a savings for these locking tuners because they lock so fast. So I'm going to lock that, and then I am just going to tighten my string. And the convenient thing, really awesome thing about these tuning machines is that they just bite right away. So, let's see here. I lied, I am going to use the tuning machine. the helper there. All right. Now I'm immediately under tension. Now, when you first get your strings under tension, you are not gonna be able to have them be stable. So a thing that you can do to just kind of work them in is literally just get your fingers under there a little bit and just pull it a little bit, put it under a little bit more tension, and then tighten it a little bit again. And as you work your way up, keep putting more strings on and just gradually work them in. There's going to be that period of settling when the strings start to finally meet their equilibrium and they get to the point where they've been under tension long enough and they're at their final tension where they will begin to be more stable. If your instrument hasn't been set up correctly, it's probably not going to be very stable, and even more importantly, it's not going to be, even more important, it's not going to be in tune from the open string up to the 12th fret. So I would recommend, if you don't have the ability to set up a guitar, well, if you don't have the ability to set up a guitar, you probably, if you have the ability to set up a guitar, you probably already know how to change strings. It's kind of a cart before the horse thing. If you've never done either and you really want to have your instrument set up well so you'll be able to put strings on it with confidence and have consistent results and have a guitar that just plays better, get your instrument set up. There are some killer ones in the Philadelphia area. One of my absolute favorites, John Treffs, he's down by the International Airport. He's awesome. Get your guitar set up by somebody competent. If you have a guitar teacher, your instructor might be able to set it up for you as well. And then you'll be able to change strings and get lots of life and wear out of each set. One last thing I want to touch on before I wrap things up is the necessity to wipe your strings down when you're done playing. Try to get as much of the crud. Our fingers, our skin emits not just sweat, but lots of oils. And those oils will crud up the strings and make them less resonant. A lot of modern strings are coated in materials and have this resistance to the kind of corrosion that used to be really bad decades ago. But there's still no substitute for just taking care of your instrument, taking care of the strings, and maintaining it. You'll get a little bit more life out of it. Just be thankful that guitar strings are a lot cheaper than violin strings. So, happy stringing, everybody. If you have questions, please leave it in the comments section, and I'll see you for another episode of Building Blocks next Wednesday at 12 noon. I'm Brian Fitzy. Be well, do good things. See you guys.